So Warzone 2 has been out long enough now where we've got a pretty good grasp on the meta of this game, at least in the terms of the current weapon balance right now. And in this video, I'll show you the top 10 best loadout weapons to build, and these are going to help you be extremely effective in game, whether you're buying your weapon from the actual buy station or you're getting a loadout drop, what have you. It works a little different than to Warzone 1, but regardless, I'm going to show you some extremely effective weapons and their current builds to use in the game right now. I should also mention that all of these attachments are going to be tuned to some extent. However, if you don't have the ability to tune these attachments as your weapon isn't properly leveled enough, you can still continue to run the build and then tune the attachments properly when it's of the, current level. Feel free to pause or rewind the video at any point as we go along, but taking the number 10 spot is going to be the Cast-Off 74U. This build, I actually am a really big fan of in Warzone. I've been using this quite a lot, and as of me making this video, this weapon did just catch a slight nerf, so I'm putting it down here a little bit lower on the list because I'm not entirely sure if this is still going to dominate the meta as it has been. It wasn't a huge nerf, and in all honesty will probably remain in the same tier as it has been pre-nerf, but these attachments are specifically made for a little bit more of a close range, aggressive class. There are some scenarios in Warzone where it is just going to be outrange, so it's recommended that you carry either some kind of DMR or a sniper. It's really good to pair it with. Now, the way all of these guns are going to be tuned with their attachments is what we call sweet spot tuning, where it's you don't necessarily tune it all the way to one end or the other. I mean, sometimes you do, but not always. It's hard to prove if sweet spot tuning is always the best idea for every attachment in the game, as without proper testing, we can't really know. But I've attempted to do some sweet spot tuning with a lot of these builds, and while it may help in some cases, may hurt in other ones, it's going to be literally pixels of differences. So it's not the biggest deal in the world if you don't get the tuning exactly right down to the number, but regardless, this build is extremely effective and it's a lot of fun. I highly recommend you try it out. I think it's probably still one of the better guns in the game despite the nerf. Now, coming in at the number 9 spot is still one of the best guns in the game and is probably one of my favorite for traditional multiplayer, but the Vaznev 9K in Warzone is also unbelievably effective. Now, I've gone through a bunch of iterations of this build and a couple of different, attachments actually individually put on there and then different tunings of such, but this is ultimately the build that I've been the most happy with. It may not be the perfect one at the moment, but I'm still working on it. However, this is extremely functional, it's workable, and it's actually really good. The biggest differences between building it for Warzone 2 and for the multiplayer build, this one is way suited better for medium range, and you might say this is like a low-hitting SMG that it may not even really have that much damage, out mid-range, but it actually does. It's decent for that. I would say it's probably comparable to the Cast-Off 74U, but it might be a little more effective in that regard. At least that's been my experience. I should also mention, with this build specifically, the recoil is way more predictable than the Cast-Off, and so if that's something that is important to you, which is relative consistency, then I think the Vaznev is probably the way to go, all things considered. But big fan of this gun, also coming at the number 9 spot. But taking number 8. Anyways, taking the number 8 spot is going to be the STB. Again, one of my personal favorites in the game, and also this gun did get a nerf at some point, but that doesn't keep it from being one of the most effective weapons, even in Warzone as well as multiplayer, but the builds are going to be vastly different, and something along these lines is going to be what I recommend. I think with this weapon specifically, finding the proper grip was really the weirdest thing. I know a lot of people swear and they live by the F-Tac Ripper, but I always feel like the recoil is just a bit more inconsistent that way, and I think the pineapple grip is going to be far better, especially for medium and long range. It's just more consistent. I think maybe the ADS speed isn't quite as snappy as it is with the F-Tac Ripper, but I think this is probably the way to go insofar as this build specifically is. However, when it comes to Warzone, the one thing you're missing out on with this gun specifically is it has no optics. So for really longer range engagements, you're probably going to want to carry something that's more suited to that. Again, like a DMR or sniper is a really good complement to this, but as far as even short, close range, medium, whatever, this gun is an absolute machine. I'm not gonna lie. So big fan of this one, and it's really, common to see in game as well, so you may as well have a good one built. Coming in at number 7 is a pretty straightforward one. There's nothing really too crazy going on here, but this is the Cast-Off 74U or the AK-47, and the way this gun is built is to maximize its potential at medium to slightly longer ranges and also consistent recoil. That is the probably biggest attribute where the AK can struggle, is being, really consistent in the way that it bounces and kicks and all that kind of stuff. So when you have a weapon that can mitigate that to some extent, this is probably the most consistent feeling AK that you are ever going to get. When it comes to optics, really it's personal preference. You can have something slightly higher magnification, but with the way the AK actually shoots, I can't recommend anything really higher than like 3 or 4x. But yeah, pretty straightforward build here, and as far as the tuning goes, it may not be 100% perfect, but it's as good as it's going to get for now, and I think if this gun gets tuned at all in the future, it might be better, might be worse, we'll see, but this gun is very consistent all around. Coming in at the number 6 spot is going to be the Lockman sub, or otherwise known as the MP5, and this build is kind of particular, and a lot of this has some, variability for maybe how you want to run it. The biggest change I think you're going to make is potentially the magazine. You can go with the 50 round drum mag, and I think that is absolutely viable. What you're going to lose is like maybe a little bit of handling speed, but it might be better if you're playing something like quads, for example, but if you're playing solos or possibly even duos, the 40 round mag I think is actually kind of optimal, and it definitely gets the job done. And then everything else is more or less there to cut out for its extended range, and also it's very effective up close. I think you're going to be surprised about just how consistent this gun feels. If there is a downside, you pretty much need to run something with an optic, whether it be a sniper, DMR, or whatever. The iron sights are good here, don't get me wrong, but you're not going to be like beaming people at a distance, but it's an up close monster. And for what it's worth, it might be one of the most slept on guns in the game. It's certainly not like the best gun ever, but it's up there and it's viable, it's competitive. Anything you need it to do, it can pretty much get the job done. I think we're going to start seeing it in game a lot more commonly soon. But yeah, this is the build I'm going to recommend for now, and we'll see where it goes in the future. The number 5 spot is going to be, once again, the king of consistency, always the M4. Now, this one is very different to the build that I, usually recommend for traditional multiplayer, mostly in the sense of how the barrel and muzzle are going to function. This weapon also has the 60 round magazine, so the aim down sight speed is going to be a little bit sluggish. I'm not going to lie. That, combined with the muzzle attachment as well, it is not a very snappy weapon, but what I will say, the recoil is buttery smooth, and my God, is this thing consistent. At the end of the day, the choice of optic is really up to you. I usually like this red dot a whole lot, but you can run something that's higher magnification, and because of how smooth the recoil is, it's not going to affect it too much, and you can be extremely effective with something like a 3 or 4x magnification kind of optic. Coming in at number 4, though, this is starting to get to our really good weapons. This is the RAL MG, and this one is probably the one that shocked me the most, man. I've been playing this gun a lot more than I thought I would. I'm not really a big LMG guy, but I've been playing around with this one, and I've kind of settled on this being the particular build I really like. And I'm not gonna lie, this gun is absolutely broken. I think the biggest changes you can make are, again, probably the optic. You can go with something more high magnification. It's not a very aggressive gun at all. However, this is really good against squads or multiple targets at the same time. It's got an absolutely insane magazine, so you're not gonna have to really worry about ammo during mid gunfights. And the recoil, I'm just gonna kind of let it speak for itself. It was a really rare occurrence for me to get ever actually outgunned in a head-on-head gunfight. Of course, you can get taken by surprise and everything, and this gun is really hard to react with, but in a head-on gunfight, this thing almost never loses. I'm not kidding. Give it a try, and you'll see exactly what I mean, but it's absolutely cracked. Taking the number 3 spot is the TAC 56, and is easily the best gun in the game, or one of, for sure, and I think the biggest change you might make between these two, the 60-round mag is probably going to be better for, like, squads or even, like, trios, and then the 40-round magazine I recommend for anything like, solos or duos, but everything else, this is the proper tuning that I have, and I've played around a lot with this one, and this is the build that I've ultimately settled on. Again, I like the pineapple grip as well for the TAC, but I think the F-TAC Ripper does decent enough on this. The biggest downside to this gun in particular is, of course, there is no optic. I think the iron sights are beyond usable. They're excellent, but that does leave something to be desired for precision and, of course, extremely long distance battles, so pairing this with a sniper is really not a bad idea. Close range, maybe it's not the most like effective gun. It doesn't fry like right in super close quarters combat scenarios, but anything even I would say kind of close to medium long range, it dominates. You're really not going to beat this gun, and this is probably the one that it's like my comfort pick at this point. Coming into the number 2 spot is the Fennec build, and this one is very different to my multiplayer version, but this was created for one purpose specifically, and that was being an absolute bullet hose with like probably one of the best TTKs ever. This is literally the gun you're going to want for up-close combat scenarios. You can carry other guns for medium, long-range stuff, but it's pretty much unbeatable in terms of consistency and also just how dominant you're going to be in anything like up to, I don't know, 20, 30 meters. It's also quite a common weapon to come across in-game, as it's, you know, really part of the ground loot, and it's just a weapon you're going to see very frequently in your matches. Now, before we unveil the number one spot, I do want to give a quick honorable mention to the brand new Chimera rifle, or aka the Honey Badger from Ghost. This is probably going to be the best way to build this for Warzone. Now, admittedly, this is not the best gun in the game. The Honey Badger as it is right now is very good, don't get me wrong, but it does get outclassed by some of the better weapons at the moment. So I'm just going to say, if you want something pretty good and you just like the weapon, by all means run it. But if you're looking for something that is just the most competitive gun and you don't care about like what, you know, if you actually like the weapon or not, then the Honey Badger may not be the one. It struggles a little bit at long range, and the recoil is very inconsistent for some odd reason, despite these attachments being the thing that mitigates that as much as possible. It's pretty good, but it's not the best. But finally, coming in at the number one spot is my favorite gun in Warzone period right now, and that is the RPK, and specifically this build. Once again, never been a big LMG guy, but the way this RPK plays is the perfect cross between an LMG and a more aggressive AR. This has specifically to do with the magazine attachments you can run. It is by no means the biggest mag you can run on it, and the, you know, red dot that I also run is set out for medium range. Nothing really too crazy there, but despite being an LMG, the ADS speed is relatively snappy, but the real strength to this gun is the fact that there is basically no recoil, and when I mean no recoil, I mean it. You hear oftentimes, oh, this gun just doesn't really kick that much, whatever. This gun kind of feels illegal. Like, it feels like a cheat code. It's surprising because I didn't think the RPK was gonna be that good in Warzone, as it's not the most effective like multiplayer weapon. I don't really use it, but in Warzone specifically, this is probably what I'm gonna say is like one of the best guns in the game right now, period. And there are, you know, changes that can be made to some of these weapons. A lot of them are gonna get nerfed in upcoming patches, I'm sure. We've already seen a little bit of that, particularly with the cast-off, and this is by no means an end-all be-all list, but at the current moment in the game and the balance patches we have, this is what I'm gonna recommend for your loadouts to run, and I think these are going to give you a lot of success. So if you guys enjoyed this, just drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. That'd be great, and that's pretty much all I got for you guys today. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.